Hi, I'm Linda. Welcome to Beautiful Thrift Homemaking. We're reading through a vintage novel and cookbook from 1917. It's an instructional novel that shares a lot of recipes. We're following 1 year in the life of a newlywed named Bettina, and her husband is Bob. And Bettina is sharing with us her homemaking skills, especially what she's doing in the kitchen. And she shares her knowledge with her friends and helps them to learn to be homemakers. We're in chapter 43, and we're also going to read chapter 44 today. We're finishing the month of August with these two chapters. Sunday dinner at the Dixons. You seem to have gained in weight, Frank, said Bob, as he and Bettina sat down to Sunday dinner with the Dixons. And what's more, I've gained in spirits. Say, there's nothing like living in a real home. Why, people just think of having Charlotte say to me, as she did yesterday. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't read that right. Why, people, just think of having Charlotte say to me, as she did yesterday, Frank, Bob and Bettina are coming to dinner tomorrow, and I want you to plan the menu. And here it is. Excuse me for seeming too proud of my own good judgment and my wife's skill in cookery, but hush, Frank, maybe Bob and Bettina won't like your choice of dishes or your wife's cooking. What? Said Bob. I have yet to meet the person who doesn't like fried chicken and roasting ears and new potatoes. Say, it's a man-sized dinner, all right, isn't it? Said Mr. Dixon. You know, ever since I was a boy, my idea of Sunday dinner, at least in the summer, has been fried chicken with gravy, new potatoes, boiled corn on the cob, and ice cream with sliced peaches. Because ice cream is coming, isn't it, Charlotte? At least I ordered it, and this appears to be my lucky day. Indeed it is coming, said Mrs. Dixon. You see, Bettina, ever since I came to keep house, thanks to you, I've longed for the time to come when I could let Frank plan a company meal that I could carry out to the last detail. I have tried all these things before, although not all at the same time. I have always suspected that he would order fried chicken and its accessories, a little boy dinner, I call this. So when I told him that he might plan the meal, I knew that I could cook it. You see, I have wanted to invite you and Bob. Oh, I've been thinking of it for a long time. But you can cook so well that I thought perhaps you'd rather eat at home. Charlotte, this is a perfect dinner, far better than I could get. I know. This salad is an acquired taste with me, put in Mr. Dixon. In my boyhood, my ideal dinner did not include salad, but Charlotte said there must be one, so this was my choice. I mixed the oil dressing myself, he added with pride. It was a simple dinner to get, said Mrs. Dixon. But now, Frank, we mustn't boast any more about our own dinner, must we? Bob and Bettina will laugh at us. You see, we're regular children since we took the house, but we do have lots of fun. I wouldn't go back to hotel living for anything in the world. And neither would I, said Frank, if for no other reason than the joy of entertaining our friends at dinner this way. Their Sunday dinner consisted of fried chicken, new boiled potatoes, corn on the cob, bread, butter, sliced cucumber, tomato, and onion salad, oil dressing, vanilla ice cream with peaches, white cake, and iced tea. And in this cookbook, we have Bettina's recipes for the vegetable salad and the dressing, peaches for ice cream, how to prepare them, and the white cake recipe, including a sea sugar icing and a recipe for vanilla ice cream. All right, so we'll discuss that in a moment. But next, we're going to read chapter 44, A Rainy Day Evening at Home. This is just the kind of cold, rainy evening, said Bob as he pushed back his chair, that makes me feel like making candy. Fine, said Bettina. What kind shall it be? Uh-oh. I don't know how to pronounce this. Penoche. if you have all the ingredients. I think I have. Let's see. It's better when it's made partly with sea sugar, and I have that. I wonder if there will be enough milk left for breakfast if we use a little. Well, Penoche really tastes exactly as good when it is made with water instead, though of course it isn't so rich. But then I think we do have enough milk. First of all, though, said Bob, we'll wash these dishes. It was a mighty good dinner tonight, Bettina. The nice kind of a hot meal that it seems good to come home to on a night like this. It was an oven dinner, Bob. You see, the meatloaf, the scalloped potatoes, and the rice pudding were all in the oven at once. I always try to use the oven for more than one dish if I am using it at all. We seem to have eaten all of this tomato sauce, said Bob as he carried out the dish, but there is a good deal of meat left. Will you have to make more sauce? No, I plan just enough for one meal. Then tomorrow I'll serve the rest of the meat cold without a sauce. How did you like the rice pudding hot as it was tonight? You know, I usually serve it cold. It tasted very good for a cold evening. There, all these dishes are ready to wash, Bettina. Will you get out some tea towels for me? The dinner that night consisted of hot meatloaf, tomato sauce, scalloped potatoes, bread, butter, and rice pudding. And in the book, we have the recipe for the beef loaf, the tomato sauce, the scalloped potatoes, the rice pudding, and the Penoche, which obviously, when I meet you in a second here to discuss these chapters, I will have learned to pronounce that word. All right, we're going to dive into our discussion of these two chapters, and hopefully you're staying hydrated. It is still summer. We're in the month of August right now. When I'm filming this, this is the very last day of August. I've got an iced chicory root tea, which has kind of a roasted flavor to it. All right, chapter 43, we see Bob and Bettina have been invited over to the Dixons' home for dinner. And you may remember that the Dixons are Frank and Charlotte, Mr. and Mrs. Dixon, when we first met them. So they appear to be a little bit older than Bob and Bettina, and they were living in a hotel their entire married life. In fact, Mrs. Dixon had grown up living in a hotel and hadn't learned any homemaking skills because of that. When Bob and Bettina invited the Dixons to eat at their own home, that inspired Mrs. Dixon, and it really touched Frank's heart. He wanted a home of his own. So Bettina was instrumental in helping them to rent a home, and she also was giving Mrs. Dixon tips and direction in how to prepare foods at home. So that's been a wonderful development, that now they feel confident enough to invite Bob and Bettina to have a meal with them at their home. And this got me thinking, why do sometimes you may have encountered this situation where you've invited people over to your home to share a meal and they have never invited you back, or you've invited them multiple times, they've come over and enjoyed hospitality in your home, but you've never been in their home and haven't been invited there. So that's something that can kind of hurt. But I think that what we need to do in that case is just provide grace to them and realize that there might be multiple reasons going on with that situation. It might be that just as Mrs. Dixon didn't feel confident and hadn't had a lot of years of experience in preparing meals for guests, that might be the situation with your friends as well. So there could be other reasons. It could be financial. It could be that the house is not in order, that it's not clean. I have seen a lot of videos on YouTube where cleaners have worked to declutter homes of people who have been accumulating excess, you might say, and it really can get out of control. And so it could be that some of the people you know might have homes that are out of control, that have excessive clutter built up. I know also, like my husband had, no, I'm sorry, one of my brothers had told me that he had gone into a home of one of his students years ago where um, where the kitchen was just piled with dirty dishes, and there wasn't anything clean to eat off of anymore. So it may be more common than we'd like to think, or that we would hope. That might be a reason people don't invite us over to their homes. It might also have to do with pets. Perhaps their dogs are not friendly and so forth. So I think we should just give grace and continue. Our duty is to honor God with what we do and not worry about how other people live their lives. All we can do is be, as Bettina is, be a model, and be a role model, and be an encourager. Say what builds other people up. And Mrs. Dixon was humble enough to ask for direction and help from Bettina, a younger woman. And so that was a beautiful thing that we observed, that humility. So the Dixons are so happy to be in a home. They're having fun together. You know, hotel life was boring. Hotel life lacked opportunity to have useful employment, and creativity. Opportunities for creativity were lacking. I was thinking about maybe an equivalent today would be someone who goes on a cruise. I have never been on a cruise, but people love it because they don't have to cook, and they get all this special fancy food and can eat all they want and so forth. But you know, it would be tiring, wouldn't it, to be on a cruise ship forever and not have your own home and your own kitchen, and to do your own things the way you like them. I know when my mom came to stay with us for a year while we were getting a little house ready for her to move into, a little house that was here on our property that had been abandoned for 6 or 8 years before we purchased the property. We had to do a lot of work in there to get it ready for her to live in. And in fact, we only did just a certain amount that was enough that she was satisfied to move in there. And then when she passed away, we have had to rebuild that house and really fix it up. So we're in the last stages of that process right now over there. But my mom, while she stayed with us for a year, at first she was so happy someone was cooking for her. That would be me. And serving her, and she really enjoyed that break because she had been, a widow for a long time and just working to take care of herself. Well, after a while, she grew weary of being in our home and having somebody serve her and not getting to make things the way she wanted and not working and piddling around in her own kitchen. So she was really happy when she got to move over there. So that's the state of the Dixons. They're happy to have this useful work to do in their own home and the creativity opportunities that are there because of it. So Sunday dinner, what is your idea of the perfect Sunday dinner? We see here Frank's perfect Sunday dinner was a boyhood memory for him of fried chicken with gravy, new potatoes and corn on the cob, ice cream with sliced peaches. So I wonder, what is your favorite Sunday dinner? And I'm thinking about that myself. Summertime meal, I think of a kind of a picnic, barbecue. That's the word I'm looking for. I think kind of a barbecue meal. So what I envision as the perfect summer meal. I think of meat grilled outside on a barbecue, and I think of potato salad made at home. So Mrs. Dixon asked Frank to plan this company meal. She knew he was going to go with those things. He must have talked about it. And she added a salad to the menu and then practiced each dish before inviting company over. So let's look at those recipes. We have the vegetable salad was made with 2 medium-sized tomatoes and a half a cucumber and 1 onion. And then the tomatoes were peeled. The cucumber was peeled and then cubed. The onion was chopped fine. And then a dressing was made by stirring together vigorously 4 tablespoons of vinegar with 2 tablespoons of oil, a half a teaspoon of salt, and there, of course, our 4th teaspoon of paprika. Now, you'll notice that the proportion of vinegar to oil is pretty common for there to be twice as much vinegar as oil for homemade salad dressing. You can kind of just memorize that and keep that in mind if you want to whip one together sometime on your own without any kind of recipe. You can do that at 1 to 2 ratio. So 1 part oil to 2 parts vinegar, and then of course a little bit of salt and whatever else you want to add to that to flavor it. And then she had covered those tomatoes, cucumbers, and onions with this dressing, allowing it to stand for 10 minutes in the ice box before serving over some head lettuce. Now the peaches for the ice cream were made sweetened. She sliced 2 cups of peaches and added 2/3 a cup of sugar to the peaches and let that stand in the ice box for 10 minutes and then be placed around the ice cream. There was also white cake. And I don't know about you, but something about white cake, I guess that's why I was so excited about the wedding cakes too in another chapter. White cake is just, I haven't found the perfect recipe yet for scratch-made white cake, but I really don't like to use box cake mixes, so I have tried a number of them. This white cake is a half a cup of butter, 1 1/2 cups of sugar, 2 2/3 cups of sifted flour, 5 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/8 a teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of milk, 4 egg whites beaten stiffly, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla and a half a teaspoon of lemon extract. Cream the butter, add the sugar, and continue creaming for 2 minutes. Alternately add all the dry ingredients and the milk. Beat well. Cut and fold in the egg whites. Add the flavoring. Bake in 2 buttered layer cake pans, 25 minutes in a moderate oven. Cover with sea sugar icing. Okay, we're going to talk about the icing, but first I want to say that once again we have egg whites whipped up to stiff peaks and then folded into a batter just before baking. So we find that in waffles and other kinds of bread and cakes, making a very light result. All right, so now the sea sugar icing, we learned on page 71, that was chapter 18, that sea sugar is a light brown sugar. So a sea sugar icing, it sounds pretty fun on a white cake to have a light brown sugar icing. You have 3 egg whites, 3 cups of light brown sugar, 2/3 a cup of water, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Cook the sugar and the water together without stirring until the icing clicks in cold water. So you put a little drop from a spoon into a glass of cold water, and you hear a little click. Remove from the fire and pour very slowly over the stiffly beaten egg whites. Beat vigorously and continuously until the icing gets thick and creamy. Add the vanilla and spread on the cake. Okay, that sounds really good to me. I think I would love to try this. If only I could eat more sweets, but I probably shouldn't. But we'll see. The white cake and the sea sugar icing. We also have vanilla ice cream, homemade. It's made with a quart of cream, 3/4 a cup of sugar, 1 tablespoon of vanilla, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. Those things are mixed together, and then they go into an ice cream freezer. In this case, it was turned until the mixture stiffened and packed for 2 hours to ripen. So you may remember those old hand crank churn ice cream makers And you churn and churn and churn. It gets harder and harder, and then when it's the right, then you pack in the ice around it again. And I think there was some salt involved in that you put around the ice to keep it cold, and on the outside of the container, and you let it sit or ripen. In this case, they called it. Well, that was interesting. Okay, so fun. And some ideas to think about again. Or are you sharing hospitality in your home? And if not, is it because you lack confidence or practice? Remember, Mrs. Dixon practiced each of these meals, each of these items in the meal beforehand, and got a little bit of confidence in order to make that for her guests. And it was a menu that her husband approved of also, that he thought was worth sharing, right? And he reflected back on his boyhood, and it just brought him such joy. And so she really blessed her husband that way. So that was called a company meal. Now, chapter 44, a rainy evening at home. That was really fun and cozy. And we see the sea sugar appearing again. In this chapter, we have the brown sugar. Now, here's this word. They're making a brown sugar fudge, as it turns out, as I looked into it. So the way that it's spelled in this old cookbook from 1917 was P-E-N-O-C-H-E. And I looked that up, and indeed, it is sometimes pronounced pinoche or panoche, but a more common spelling that we use today is, instead of an O, it's a U. P-E-N-U-C-H-E, which is panucci or panucci or pinucci. So either one. So it depends on where you are regionally in the United States as to how you pronounce that, apparently. So the fact that I didn't know how to pronounce it must be it's not very popular in the region I live in. I'm in Northern California, and I've lived my life mostly in Southern California. Oh, Central California, the Central Coast. We're getting on to maybe 1/3 of my life in each of those three places, with the exception of 1 year in Northern Alabama. Okay, so pinucci is a light brown sugar fudge, and we have the recipe for it here. Let's see, it's not the first one listed because it was the dessert. Here we go. It was 2 cups of light brown sugar, called sea sugar in this book, 1 cup of granulated sugar, 1 tablespoon of butter, 2/3 a cup of milk, 1/4 of teaspoon of cream of tartar, 1/4 of cup of nut meats, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. The directions are to mix the sugar, butter, milk, and cream of tartar. To cook, stirring occasionally to prevent from scorching until a soft ball is formed when a little candy is dropped in cold water. Remove from the fire and do not stir until it is cool. Put back on the stove for 1 minute, stirring constantly. Remove from the stove and beat vigorously until very creamy. Add the nuts and vanilla. When hard and creamy, remove from the pan, putting into shape and kneading until soft and creamy. Place on a buttered pan, padding to the thickness of 3/4 of an inch. Cut into the desired shape. All right, so that was the candy that Bob wanted to make on a rainy evening at home. Doesn't that sound fun? I think they worked on that together after they did the dishes, because Bob helped clear the table after dinner, and he got the dishes ready to wash, and wanted to get that chore done before they made the candy. Now, Bettina made for dinner an oven dinner, she called it. She was using one of our 6 R's. She was reducing by conserving energy. She cooked in the oven the meatloaf, the scalloped potatoes, and the rice pudding all at the same time in that oven to prepare for dinner. So that was a good energy-saving meal. Now, the beef loaf is made with beef cut from the round and salt pork. The meat was ground well and mixed with the ingredients, patted into an oblong shape and placed in a well-buttered pan. Then there was 3 tablespoons of water added to the pan, and then a little dots of a tablespoon of butter, little dots of butter placed on top of the loaf. It was covered and baked for 35 minutes in a moderate oven. So the ingredients for that were a pound of beef and 1/4 a pound of salt pork, 1/2 a teaspoon of salt and 1/4 a teaspoon of pepper, 1/8 a teaspoon of onion salt, 1/4 a cup of cracker or bread crumbs, so that was the filler to expand things and lighten it up, and 1 egg yolk, and a tablespoon of milk and a tablespoon of butter. All right. And remember in another one, she said not to overwork. I think that was when they were making the hamburger or steak, the ground steak patties or whatever it was called. They were called cakes, weren't they? When they were making hamburgers, not to overwork it or press it too hard. The tomato sauce was made fresh to serve alongside. It was hot and it was served alongside the hot meatloaf. 1 cup of tomatoes cut up were simmered in 1/2 a cup of water with 2 bay leaves. And also there was a teaspoon of sugar and 1/4 a teaspoon of ground cloves and 1 slice of onion or 1/8 of tablespoon of onion salt in there with it, simmering. Then it was strained and all the pulp was pressed out. Melt the butter, add the flour, blend well, slowly add the strained tomato and salt. Interesting, so she's using that same technique that we use for the white sauces. She's making kind of a gravy style tomato sauce, isn't she? It was then cooked for 1 minute and then put beside that hot meatloaf. Then she made the scalloped potatoes, which we've talked about before. I went into my little tin of seashells that I have here. Actually, keep it on that top of that bookcase behind me. I have this little metal tin, and it's full of all these beautiful seashells. So I dug out a scallop shell just to say that our scalloped potatoes. So this is a scallop seashell. I was watching a cooking show that was pretty fascinating because there was a little dish, a dish that was shaped like this with the scallop lines cut into it. And it was about, that size, the size of the hands like that. So if you can imagine this enlarged, this size, and the potatoes were put in that, and then these lines that are there were cut, kind of impressed into the top of the potatoes, and then it was baked. I saw that on a program on YouTube that was about cooking during the colonial era, and they were making the scalloped potatoes, and I believe it was more like mashed potatoes cooked in there, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if I remember exactly, but I don't think it was the sliced potatoes like are used here in this recipe and the ones that you probably know of. So for scalloped potatoes here, we have the 4 potatoes, medium size, washed and peeled and sliced very thin. Then mix thoroughly with the flour, which is 2 tablespoons of flour, the salt, a tablespoon of salt. Boy, that's a lot. 1/4 a teaspoon of pepper and 2 tablespoons of butter. I'm trying to see if maybe I didn't read that right, but wash and peel the potatoes, slice very thin, mix through the sliced potatoes, the flour, salt, pepper, and the butter in small pieces. Place the mixture in a well-buttered pan or baking dish and cover with milk. Usually 1 cup suffices. Bake in a moderate oven 45 to 50 minutes. Do not fill the pan more than 3/4 full, as the potatoes will boil over. All right. Excuse me. Finally, we have the rice pudding. And I'd like to talk about that because one last thing I wanted to mention is Bettina's leftovers. So serving hot at the first time, the meatloaf. Serving hot the first time, the rice pudding. Leftovers. Serving the meatloaf cold. Serving the rice pudding cold. Excuse me. Something in my throat. My apologies. Thanks for hanging with me. Okay, the rice pudding. Sounds delicious. 1 1/4 cups of milk, 1 egg, 4 tablespoons of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 cup of cooked rice, 1 teaspoon of butter, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. Beat the eggs, add the sugar, salt, nutmeg, vanilla, and milk, then stir in the rice. Pour the mixture into a well-buttered baking dish and dot over with the butter. Bake in a moderate oven 25 minutes. It may be served hot or cold. Cream may be served with it if desired. And I think in another video I told you about my mother liking rice pudding with raisins in it because that was a special treat when she was growing up. Her family did not have a lot of money, and that was the kind of food that was considered as a real nice treat because it was but it was inexpensive. So my grandmother was able to provide that for her. All right, I think we've talked about everything from these 2 chapters. Thank you so much. Next time I see you will be in the month of September with Bettina.